Delighted to welcome you to this introductory webinar in terms of how to get involved as we start the production of the local nature recovery strategy for Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes. As I say, my name's David Sutherland. I'm kind of one of the senior managers at Bucks, and so my role is, I suppose, getting the authority ready in respect of all things to do with the Environment Act, particularly in relation to local nature recovery strategy, and obviously introducing biodiversity net gain in the planning system, and the two go hand in hand. So hence my involvement with both. And I was kind of, having been part of one of the pilot local nature recovery strategies, I have to say I kind of, and seeing the process and the opportunities that local nature recovery strategies present, yeah, it's an exciting process, and in terms of recognizing what it kind of can do, it's clearly one of the key policies of the government to support their legally binding commitment to reverse nature's decline. And what this is about, I suppose, it's about facilitated, targeted, coordinated, and I suppose most importantly, collaborative action in the right place in terms of how we restore and recover nature. And it's a spatial strategy as well, so it's kind of where do we do this spatially that's going to make most effective sense. And hopefully the kind of the final documents that we pull together with your help, they will guide and influence both private, public and voluntary sectors in terms of where we should focus our collective action. Next slide, please, Sachi. So just in terms of who you've, I suppose, got on the call today, just in terms of, so it's a partnership approach in terms of the local nature recovery strategy. So obviously you've got myself in terms of Buckinghamshire Council. We also have our local nature partnership. So we have Nicola, who's going to be doing one of the bits of the presentation. We also have Phil Snell from Milton Keynes and City Council. We have Sarah from Natural England, and we have Sachi, who's the LNRS project manager. So that's the kind of the core team, as it were. And then we have a little steering group that sits underneath that contains, I suppose, other organisations that are going to help guide the process. Having said that, you know, the whole point of this is that this is a collaborative approach, and it's going to involve, you know, multiple people in terms of an engagement in terms of how we make sure that we get the right strategy in place. Sachi, I don't know if it's me, but I'm still seeing the front slide. No, it's moved on. Okay, so that's just me. So okay. So obviously, you know, we talked about it's entirely collaborative approach, and that's, you know, absolutely fundamental. Next slide then, please, Sachi. Just a bit about housekeeping. So just a quick note that it is going to be recorded, just for those people that are unable to attend, just so that we can send a recording out to them afterwards. Just if you do put anything in the chat or the Q&A, that's not recorded, so just so you're aware of that. Your cameras and microphones, I think, have probably been turned off automatically, just in terms of the smooth running. So if you can put questions and answers in the Q&A function, as I mentioned, we'll use that as the main kind of mechanism, I think, just to see what your questions are. We'll try and answer them as we go. But if not, by all means, when we get to the end, we'll try and cover those then. If we kind of run out of time, then we'll obviously follow them up with some FAQs. Throughout the webinar, there'll be a couple of interactive polls, and we will post the links as we kind of go along in the chat, or there will be a QR code. So if you've got your smartphone, then by all means, use that. Moving on to the next slide, please, Sachi. So just in terms of the agenda, so the things that we're going to cover this evening. So we're going to do a bit about what is a local nature recovery strategy and why does it matter. There'll be a bit about, I suppose, why we're trying to recover nature. There'll be a section that Nicola's going to cover in respect of just some of the key aspects of nature in Buckinghamshire, and obviously why that's important in terms of restoring and recovering nature. And then we'll kind of set out at the end segment how you can get involved in terms of supporting the local nature recovery strategy. And there'll be various ways, I think, which we will set out to do that, including a little survey at the end in terms of your thoughts, in terms of how you want to use it, so on and so forth. So, and then there'll be the Q&A at the end. So that's the agenda. Next slide, please. Just a quick poll, as I mentioned. And this one is, I suppose, just asking you in respect of, what do you feel you know about local nature recovery strategies, and why is it important? So this is just to gauge, I suppose, the level of knowledge that people have about local nature recovery strategies, and also the importance that are being placed on them. We understand, I think, the importance and the significance of these, but it's good to understand what your thinking is and where you are, and we'll kind of track that as we kind of move forward the production of the local nature recovery strategy. So if you can complete that, that'd be great. As and when the kind of the results will come in, Saatchi will just post those in the comments as we go along. At that point, I'm going to hand over to Sarah in terms of what is a local nature recovery strategy and why does it matter. So over to you, Sarah.
Great, thanks very much, David. Yeah, so as David mentioned at the beginning, my name's Sarah and I work for Natural England. And my role is to help Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes through this process. Next slide, please, Saatchi. So in terms of kind of where LNRSs have come from, they are new strategies for nature. They are legally required by the Environment Act, and every part of England is going to have an LNRS. So as you've probably picked up, our local LNRS covers both Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes. But there's also sort of a bigger environmental context in terms of national policy as well. So up on the screen there, you can see the cover and some content from the government's Environmental Improvement Plan. And that makes it very clear that LNRSs are a key mechanism for helping to achieve our environmental goals for the UK. So the goals set out in the Environmental Improvement Plan are those on the screen. And you can see there's kind of a bit of a hierarchy, and they're all working towards this apex goal of thriving plants and wildlife. So that's really sort of the ultimate aim. And then there's a number of goals that sit under or alongside that. And each of those also has objectives towards each goal. So we will sort of be thinking about this as we go through the process and how our LNRS can help to deliver these at the local level, and kind of with that in mind, also just to note that there is some guidance expected to be coming from government on sort of the relationship between LNRSs and national targets and goals, and kind of how that all fits together. So that's to come, but obviously, we are working towards this apex goal regardless. Next slide, please. So what exactly is the LNRS? It's, as I've mentioned, it's kind of this shared strategy for nature. It's going to be a collaborative process. So that's sort of why we're starting with these introductory webinars, because it's really something that's to be put together, to be built, involving everyone or as many people as we can. And as many businesses as we can in Bucks and Milton Keynes. It includes two parts. So there's a written element, and that's called the Statement of Biodiversity Priorities. That sets out what nature we've already got. We'll be collectively agreeing some priorities. So what are the top things that we want for nature in our area? And also some measures. So what needs to be done to deliver those priorities. And then the second part of the LNRS is a map, and that's called the Local Habitat Map. Again, that's going to look at what we already have. So particularly in terms of sites that are already protected for nature conservation. And then it will look at where we can implement measures, so those measures from the written part, to make the biggest difference to nature, and also where we can both make a difference for nature and deliver other environmental benefits as well. And just to note that it might be that there are some measures that we could do across the county and they'll make a sort of reasonable, great difference wherever they are. So we can still include those, but they don't need to be mapped. You'll see at the top there a banner referring to the pilot LNRS. So this is the first time LNRSs have been prepared. It's very early days, but Buckinghamshire without Milton Keynes was one of 5 pilot areas. And the purpose of the pilots was to kind of help test the process and give feedback to DEFRA, and that's kind of shaped some regulations and some statutory guidance, which has now been published. But during that process, there was a lot of responses from stakeholder engagement. It led to identification of 54 priorities, and also some mapping to look at that, where should we be delivering these priorities and measures. So whilst it's not, and it was never intended to be a finished product, we will be taking a look at the data that came out of that and reviewing it and kind of seeing what's still applicable and appropriate, and integrating that with the information that we collect from this process that we're in now. So it was a good practice in sort of getting to grips with the idea of an LNRS. There's some useful information we can use, but the way that we do things and how it looks at the end might be different because this is kind of a new process. So next slide, please, Sachi. This slide shows the steps that we need to follow to produce an LNRS over the next 12 to 18 months. This comes from some of the government guidance, but basically down the left-hand side, it shows how the map part is going to be created, and the right-hand side is about the written part. So step 1 is, like I said, looking at the maps of areas that we already have that are important for nature. And step 5 of the mapping is then, once we've agreed our priorities and measures, where do they go? Moving to the right-hand side, step 3 is that description of the strategy area, so Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes, as it already is, and then agreeing those priorities and potential measures between us. And I have deliberately missed out step 2, and that's because that's about looking at where action for nature recovery has already been taken, which will be the next time around. So this is an iterative process. We'll need to review the strategy every 3 to 10 years. And so when we come to that review, we're going to look at what's happened in between in terms of achieving nature recovery. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick example to sort of make it really clear what those priorities and measures and mapping is, because it's all to kind of get your head around the language, I suppose. So the priority is the what. So what do we want? It could be more woodland. The measures are how are we going to get there? So that could be tree planting to expand and connect existing woodland. And then the map, well, where are we going to do that? So if we're connecting and expanding existing woodland, we need to know where that is, and that will form the basis for the kind of location. But we also might want to think about woodland, for example, around towns, which could bring other benefits like helping to provide cleaner air or shade for local cooling. Next slide, please. So why does this matter? I've kind of already mentioned some of how it fits in with other government policy and objectives. There's also a number of other things either sort of starting to happen or in the near future. So biodiversity net gain is going to be mandatory as of November. And that's a policy that will require new development to increase biodiversity by 10%. And the priority for that is very much to deliver on the development site itself. But it's highly likely that some of that will need to be delivered off-site. And so developers will need to fund habitat creation off-site. And the LNRS will be really key to determining where those sites are, where the best place for that is. And in how that gain is calculated, there's actually an incentive to deliver the LNRS. Moving down, the Environment Act puts a strengthened biodiversity duty on public authorities. So they've got to consider what they can do to conserve and also to enhance biodiversity, and agree and enact policies to achieve this. So the LNRS can obviously be a really great strong steer for that. Moving on to planning, local nature recovery strategies have very much kind of been designed to work with the planning system. So for example, that's why the boundaries match the kind of planning authority boundaries. And local planning authorities will need to have regard to the LNRS. We're awaiting some guidance on kind of exactly what that relationship looks like. But we very much have an ambition to make this integrated with the planning system. Environmental land management schemes, or ELMs. So that's a sort of emerging system of government grants for farmers and land managers to support the delivery of environmental targets. So that could be taking actions that lead to improved water and air quality, or an increase in wildlife, or a lot of other measures. And then finally, future funding. So there could be a whole host of funding and ways that this strategy will be delivered. Some of them we've just been through, but we're also expecting it'll be a combination of public and private funding that will help deliver this. There's kind of a lot of emerging markets like like biodiversity net gain, like carbon credits, and then also charitable grants. And we've got a lot of organisations and people in the area already doing great work through those means. So it's helping to channel this into sort of a bigger strategic picture. Next slide, please. So what do we mean when we say nature? I imagine you've all kind of got an image in your head of what that is. So it includes habitats such as wetlands, woodlands, grasslands, and many, many more. And also species. So that could be specific animals or plants or fungi. And beyond that, nature also includes the sort of wider landscape. So things like water, geology, soils. And those are really important because they ultimately dictate which habitats and species can exist where. And finally, just to say that nature doesn't only exist in the countryside. So we'll be thinking about both rural and urban nature. Next slide. So why is healthy nature important? Hopefully you will all agree that nature has an inherent value for its own sake, but it also provides a whole host of benefits that are absolutely essential for us to live and thrive. And those benefits that we get from nature are known as ecosystem services. So as shown on this slide, they're often grouped into 4 different types: cultural, goods or provisioning services, regulating and supporting. And that's kind of talking about the things we get from nature, like giving us pleasant areas to live, to work, to socialise, giving us the things that we need from nature, like food, water, medicine, other raw materials, giving us clean air and water. And also that supporting bit is all those underlying processes that mean that nature is actually able to provide all these services to us because it's functioning as it should. So for farmers and landowners in particular, well, for farmers in particular, obviously goods, the production of food that we need. But there's also a lot of other services that you will be relying on, like regulating services such as managing flooding on your land. So You know, you're not having one area affected by flooding, and making sure that that's more predictable. Also services like healthy soils, pollination for crops, and I'm sure that the list is probably endless, and I'm sure you will have a good idea of the sort of things that nature does for you as well. So I'll now pass on to Nicola to give you a quick overview of nature in Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Yeah, just a reminder, I'm Nicola Thomas, the Partnership Manager for the Bucks and Milton Keynes Natural Environment Partnership, which is the local nature partnership that covers the area. Before I get onto my set of slides, just a little reminder to please do ask questions as we go. If anything comes to you that you would like to either clarify or ask about, the Q&A function at the top of your screen, you should see the little button there called Q&A. Please do use that, and we'll come to that at the end of the session and answer as many of your questions as we can. So what's this section about? Well, Sarah's kind of outlined what an LNRS is. My role is to give you a bit more information on the why, and why are we putting the strategy together to recover nature. So I'll give a little reminder of some of the habitats and species that we have in our area and why they matter. So looking at some of those benefits that Sarah's just outlined, but also acknowledge the threats that they all face, and then look at what we can do to help, which is where participation in the LNRS process comes in. At the end of my section, we will be asking you a question. What does nature recovery mean to you? So it might be something you want to think about as I go through my slides. So let's begin. What nature do we have on our doorstep? So this slide is obviously a quick comparison of broad scale land use and habitats in Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes, so the whole of our LNRS area. So the biodiversity value obviously will vary between these different categories, but at a very general scale, you can see some similarities there. So around sort of 2/3 of the land cover is cultivated land or amenity or improved grassland. The proportions differ slightly between Bucks and Milton Keynes, but it's about 2/3 in each. And then looking down at some of the other percentages, Bucks has a bit more woodland, trees, scrub and hedgerows than Milton Keynes does. And there's some other differences as well. But really, this is to illustrate both similarities and also just to show that both areas have that variety of habitats and land use. So let's look at those habitats and species in a bit more detail. So what are the main types of habitats we've got? What benefits do they provide? What species do they have in them? So looking at woodland, first of all, this is a picture from Ashridge. So an example of ancient woodland, but we've got patches of woodland right way across Bucks and Milton Keynes, including areas of royal former hunting forests. Why are woodlands important? Well, species that exist there include rare species of mammals, such as the hazel dormouse, some various types of bats and butterflies. Thinking about particular tree types, those of you in the Aylesbury Vale might be aware of the black poplar tree. So we've got kind of nationally significant populations of the black poplar in the Aylesbury Vale. It's a rare and declining national species. What are the wider benefits of woodland? Well, aside from providing habitat for nature and various species, and clearly providing us with timber, we increasingly are realising the benefits of woodland for capturing carbon, purifying the air, providing shade, and reducing flood risk and soil erosion, depending on where those trees are planted. So lots of wider benefits as well. Let's move to our next reminder of our next habitat. So thinking about the Chilterns, and this is kind of a broad landscape category, really, the Chilterns, which is a really specialised and fragile landscape. And this picture is of a chalk grassland, which is a managed landscape and again, a nationally important landscape and increasingly rare. Species hosted in chalk grassland, various specialised plants, including orchids, as well as butterflies and invertebrates. And the Chilterns is obviously the only place in the UK that you will find the Chilterns gentian, which is the county flower of Buckinghamshire. Wider benefits of or these ecosystem services provided by chalk grassland, well, clearly they're habitat for wildlife, including our all-important pollinators. Chilterns is obviously also a big visitor attraction, so space for recreation, health and wellbeing benefits as well. Staying with the Chilterns, we'll move on to our next key habitat, chalk streams like the river chest in this picture. They are an internationally rare habitat, and most of the world's chalk streams that occur are found in England, and many of those are actually in the Chilterns. They have some unique conditions, unique properties about them, which means that they're really important for particularly sort of rare species of aquatic plants, and a huge range of aquatic plants and animals such as the water vole, and various important fish populations like the brown trout and aquatic invertebrates. Wider benefits, again, as well as being sort of a source for water and providing habitats for nature. Clear visitor attraction, health and well-being. People walk, lots of walking places and walking routes around chalk streams. Let's stay with the water environment and look at rivers and all the associated water and wetland habitats found across Bucks and Milton Keynes. So we've got our large river systems such as the River Great Ouse and the River Tame, the River Ray, and then down in the south, the Thames, forming the southern border of Bucks. We've also got that wider water network, such as all the other sort of tributaries and water bodies and streams and ponds and the slow flowing brooks in the Aylesbury Vale, and associated wetland habitats such as the floodplain meadows. So why is the water environment important? Well, it supports a wide range of wildlife, fish, plants, invertebrates again. The wetland that occurs around some of these water environments is really important for a number of wading birds. And in terms of wider benefits, as well as supporting wildlife and being a source of water, wetlands can also help manage flood risk, clearly, and waterscapes are obviously attractive to visitors for recreation, health and wellbeing once again. And then my final kind of reminder of some of these habitats and the benefits they provide us with is urban nature. So this is a picture from Milton Keynes and an example of all the various sort of gardens and parks, street trees and other examples of nature that you find in our urban areas. Really important because that's where people find nature on their doorstep. So lots of benefits such as local climate regulation, again, sort of shade, improving air quality, providing noise barriers, attracting pollinators, and just making places more attractive to live and work. So that was a kind of whistle-stop tour of some of the habitats and all the benefits they provide us with across Bucks and Milton Keynes. And I haven't mentioned, some really important ones just in that selection. So I haven't talked about hedgerows or traditional orchards or some of our sort of arable field margins, for example. And we've got some examples of rare arable weeds or ancient box woodland, or some of our key areas that we might want to think about in terms of what we might want to preserve or improve, such as Burnham beaches and various parklands. But it does give you a flavour of what we've got, a little reminder of what we have and why it's important. But, and there's always a but, the next slide shows and again serves a reminder that our nature is under threat. So Saatchi, just the next slide, thank you. We are in the middle of a mass extinction event. 41% of our species have declined in recent decades. A lot of our UK mammals are under threat. Locally, none of our chalk streams are kind of meeting a good ecological status. They all need improving, and we're losing plant species at a higher rate than most other counties. So the kind of why is that? Pressures are on our nature. Pressure is affecting nature at all different scales. We all know about the sort of global scale climate change threats. Warmer, wetter winters, hotter, drier summers, bringing in, different types of pests, diseases, invasive species. But we also face more local pressures such as development pressure, which can lead to habitat loss. And even just the population increase of people coming into the area could, if not thought about and managed, can lead to sort of increased waste and pollution, and obviously an increase in demand for resources. We need to be obviously mindful about managing land around water systems and, changes in land ownership, for example, and how we manage land. could lead to fragmentation of certain areas and habitats if not managed in a way that might benefit nature. So there's lots of threats at all different scales, but there is some great work already being done by a lot of the organisations that we work with, and some of you too, to address a lot of these challenges. And we do recognise that. And the local nature recovery strategy will form this kind of strategic plan, so we can all work in together and in one direction, so that we can focus any future efforts around what would make the maximum impact and where for nature. So that's the reason why the LNRS will kind of bring all of that work and think about what's important where. So now I come on to what I mentioned at the start of my section, which is, what does nature recovery mean to you? So again, if you could either use the QR code on your screen, use your smartphone, or the poll is just about to go into the chat. There we go. Thank you, Sarah. Please do tell us what nature recovery means to you. The reason for asking this is that the guidance from government asks us to come up with a collaborative view of what nature recovery means in our area. So we're asking all of our stakeholder groups something similar. What you'll see on the screen in yellow is our first go at this as a steering group, and some of our working groups who've already started to think about this. So that kind of gives you somewhere to start from. So we emphasise working together. We're talking about repair and creating resilient habitats. We talk about more wildlife and wider benefits in Bucks and Milton Keynes. So if you've got any thoughts to add about what nature recovery means to you, what you think of when you think about recovering nature, please pop that in the poll. And as we go through and as the results become available, I'm sure Saatchi will pop some of the results in the chat. Okay. And now I will pass over to Saatchi for the next section about how you can get involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. So we've had some responses to the polls come in, so I'm just going to read them out. To include restore and create, the Lawton principles of bigger, better, and more joined up, the ability to adapt to climate change. So thank you for your input. There's another one here that says private, public, and voluntary sectors all pulling in the same direction. Absolutely, yes. So yeah, thanks so much. You're welcome to keep the responses coming, and the idea here is that we will look at what nature recovery means to our various stakeholder groups and incorporate that into this definition. I'm going to now talk to you a little bit about why you might want to get involved in the LNRS and how you could do so, which includes posing that question to you and asking you how you would like to get involved. So yes, as you are already aware, ecosystem services, or the lack thereof, can either cause significant disruptions or support for farm businesses. For example, nature-based solutions can help regulate the impact of floods and soil quality. We want to understand really from you which ecosystem services benefit you the most. So which ones you value, which ones you need more of. And in doing so, we can identify priorities through the LNRS, and then these will be the sort of ecosystem services that will receive attention and funding in the future through the LNRS delivery mechanisms that were mentioned earlier. The LNRS will have a direct impact on how nature is managed in Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes. We do hope that you will want to participate in having a say in that process. Farmers and landowners are expected to be key delivery partners for the LNRS. We anticipate that you could use the LNRS to identify the most appropriate options for land in terms of the emerging environmental land management schemes. And the ELMs also open up the possibility of funding for landscape scale nature recovery. And in addition to that, there are emerging markets such as biodiversity net gain and sort of the habitat banks will come out of that, carbon credit markets, as other funding opportunities that align with the LNRS. So having your say in in this process and sort of identifying those priorities for nature recovery will help us make the LNRS useful to you and in a way that it can support you in accessing future funding. Equally, we'd like to create an LNRS that is user-friendly, so knowing how you would like to use the document, the two components of it, the spatial map and the written statement of priorities, will be very helpful for us in designing it in a way that it's user-friendly and works for you. We also want to know how you think nature could be better spotted in your area. And just to mention here that some areas may not necessarily be identified within the LNRS as a priority area, but we want to hear from you about how we can incorporate more general opportunities for all farmland so that we're really addressing farmland or land in general, so that even if your patch does not fit within the priority area, we're still providing you with opportunities to participate in the LNRS process and access funding through its delivery mechanisms. Yeah, and this process really is all about co-creation, so we really do want to hear from you. And then in that same vein, moving on to how you can have your say. So we're currently at an early stage in developing the LNRS. Yes, we've had a pilot, and as was mentioned earlier, we will be incorporating the information that's come out of that pilot, but we are also looking to engage with a larger group of stakeholders and including stakeholders from Milton Keynes. So we are at an early stage in developing the LNRS and would like your views on which parts of nature are most important to preserve, improve, restore. Like I said, this will inform a series of priorities for nature, as well as the measures that can be taken to achieve these goals. So we have a very quick survey, which we request you to take today or anytime in the next couple of weeks. We'll also email this out, but the QR code is on the screen, and we'll put the link in the chat as well. The survey asks for some feedback on the webinars, but mostly it asks about your opinions on priorities for nature, as well as how you would like to use the LNRS, so in terms of format and structure. We will also be setting up a number of stakeholder consultation groups for a stakeholder consultation group for farmers, which will meet for 2 hours in November of this year and potentially June of 2024. But if you have suggestions on better dates based on your availability in terms of the farm calendar, please do let us know. And the purpose of these groups is to review the LNRS as it kind of goes along and as it develops, as this is an iterative and co-creative process, to really ensure that your priorities for nature are being met and are being included in the LNRS. The other possibility is that if there are existing groups such as the farming clusters that you would prefer to meet through, please let us know and we can see how we can make that happen so that we can engage you in a way that's easiest for you. The sort of second piece over here are some suggested options. And again, we really want to hear from you about how you would like to get involved. So if you take the survey, it provides you with a chance to tell us. But just as a few suggestions, number one, would you be interested if we developed a tool to help you identify nature farming opportunities on your farmland at no or minimal cost? Would you be interested in a list of funding opportunities to help implement the priorities of the LNRS? And equally, can we request you to be a champion of the LNRS and really tell other people, your colleagues, other farmers, other landowners about this process and how to get involved? Again, we'll send you a follow-up email with a lot of this information. But yeah, we really do want to hear from you about questions that you have and how you would like to get engaged in this process. So with that, I am going to open up to Q&A. So if you want to pop in questions in the Q&A section of the chat, that would be fantastic. And we have all our speakers today who will be able to answer your questions. So we have a few already. How does the LNRS fit in with the local plan, which is planning to build tens of thousands of houses in Buckinghamshire? David, if that, I can pass that to you.
That's fine. So as Sarah kind of pointed out, I think the planning system and the local niche recovery strategy are designed to fit very closely together, both in terms of obviously geographically, but how the two policies work together. Now, the exact guidance of that we're kind of still awaited, but you know, at the very least, you have in terms of the local niche recovery strategy is going to identify where biodiversity net gain, which is being delivered by the planning system, should be located. So there's a direct link between the two. We also envisage that it'll be the local niche recovery strategy will be an excellent evidence base for the kind of the local plan as we move into the local plan, i.e., I suppose highlighting, you know, those areas where habitat should be created, perhaps where development should not go, what ecosystem services we need to provide near to development. So I think we can use it as an excellent evidence base in terms of as we kind of to support the emerging local plans for, you know, Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes. So that's kind of how I see the value of it, but certainly in terms of the direct link of where biodiversity net gain should be located, highlighting that at a strategic factor. I'm happy to pick up the next one as well, Sarch, if that's okay.
Sure. So the other question is, what happens if not enough planning applications are submitted or approved? Who then delivers biodiversity net gain? Will this serve to dissuade planners or encourage them?
So yeah, it's a good question. So biodiversity net gain. So all developments will have to deliver a 10% biodiversity net gain. So we expect as of November of this year. So we expect, you know, most to deliver on site, i.e. they will amend the development to deliver net gain on site, and they have to obviously be able to prove that via a kind of a metric that they have to submit their application. But there still will be, I think, a significant amount of off-site net gain. So I think what we're doing as part of the local niche recovery strategy is identifying where the best places that net gain should be delivered. So we're not kind of saying all the land that we're identifying as opportunities for habitat creation should be delivered by net gain. It could be delivered by a number of different funding mechanisms, net gain being one. So I think just to, in terms of your point, so yes, so all applications will have to deliver it. And what this document will do is to identify the best place for that offsite net gain to be located, and obviously the system will encourage the location of that in the correct place in line with the local niche recovery strategy. So I hope that answers your question, Chris.
Thanks, David. And thank you, Chris, for those questions. There's a question that asks, multi-generational aspirations putting land into future schemes could mean a multi-generational commitment. How can the current farmer be certain that they are safeguarding the best interests of future generations in the business? How do the aspirations of the LNRS fit with the aspirations of local farming businesses? If I can forward that to you, David, again, and if Sarah, you'd like to add something to that as well.
Thank you. So, I mean, obviously, you know, the emerging kind of environmental land management schemes are, you know, designed to work in partnership with local niche recovery strategies. They're there to identify opportunities in terms of, I think, to help you in terms of what are the best opportunities, I suppose, on the land, what are the respective funding opportunities. So they're not kind of setting out this is how land must be managed. They're saying these are the opportunities that you can do to support a wider vision of nature's recovery. And I suppose these are the various mechanisms or channels that you know you could kind of be used to deliver them, whether it be, you know, environmental land management, whether it be biodiversity net gain. These mechanisms can work hand in hand. So and I think that's part of the thing I think we want to understand is how do we kind of uncomplicate these various funding channels that are going to be used to help implement this. So I'd like to hope that we can kind of support you in terms of, yes, we're keen to kind of support nature's recovery, and that the LNRS is literally, I suppose, the guide to kind of how that happens. So I kind of hope that answers your question and aligns in terms of your kind of local aspirations already. Because what we're seeing kind of farm clusters being set up, where kind of groups of farmers are working together to help deliver these wider aspirations, and that's entirely what we would like to support and to facilitate. I can see that Phil's got his hand up, so I'll hand over to Phil.
Phil, you're on mute.
I knew that. No, I didn't. I was just going to quickly say that it's right to consider the commitment, although some of our highest value landscapes are farm landscapes. So I think farming can work with, high biodiversity landscapes. It probably is a movement more towards an extensive form of agriculture, and also it may not be, rather than a whole farm, maybe thinking of things like watercourses, hedgerows, extension of woodlands, and probably looking to say, well, actually, where's our most productive parts of our land, and keeping those for agriculture, similar to other agricultural stewardship roles in the past. So I think it's probably trying to look at the totality of the farm business, although of course you're quite right, it is a big commitment for 30 years. So I think it's you've got to think about how those things will work, but it is about sort of trying to join up the landscape. So if there's an opportunity possibly for funding towards hedgerows, or not exactly set aside, but perhaps headland maintenance, possibly also linked with things like rights of way, and trying to get a whole picture together about how that it can actually work for individual farms. That was probably all I was going to say.
Thanks, Phil. We have another question that, Sarah, I'll pass to you. As owners of an existing county wildlife site, Calvert Brick Spits Great Moor Sailing Club, how would the LNRS impact our organisation?
Yeah, thanks. So there's no one simple answer to this, I would say, because it kind of depends on how we go through this process, and therefore it would be really great to have you inputting into the process. But an example of how it could impact kind of county wildlife sites and similar designated sites in general is that this can be part of a strategy to help bolster the wildlife that you have on that site, particularly through having that kind of join up more across the landscape. So there's lots of great things, and we've got lots of really wonderful sites in Bucks. But what the LNRS kind of brings is that bigger picture, and so if it could be that I have to admit I'm not particularly familiar with your particular site, but it might be that connecting it up to kind of other habitat somewhere else, or a similar site, could be really beneficial, or kind of buffering it could be really beneficial. And so it's all those kind of ideas that we want to feed into this. So hopefully the way that the LNRS will impact that is is to improve it and connect it up even more if we can. But yeah, it's an open door at this point. So please do kind of fill in that survey and let us know your thoughts as well.
Thank you. If there are any other questions, if you'd like to put them into the chat right now. Okay, well, again, please do take the survey, and if there are any other questions, please reach out, and we'll make sure to answer them for you. David?
Thanks very much, Sachi. So just a very big thank you for attending, showing your interest. Thank you for the questions, some really good questions there in terms of links for the planning system. Obviously, just the ongoing commitment, how the funding streams work. So thank you for your interest. Just to say, obviously, this is the start of the process, and we're really keen to hear your thoughts in terms of what you want, how you want to use the strategy. So please do take the survey. We will be coming back to you in due course for, I suppose, our main, stakeholder engagement further down the process. So hopefully this is a taster for you, us to engage with the early stage. But thank you for your attendance today. We'll circulate a copy of the recording and other questions that we've had throughout these sessions. So hopefully that if we've not answered any today, that they will be answered in that. But for the time being, thank you, and I hope you found today's session informative. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening.